right. Hello and welcome to the June 2024 Q&A session on moving to France. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation. We help people get the right visa and do all the French admin to follow their dream of living in France. I'm also the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group. I am a newly elected board member of the Association of Americans Resident Overseas, which is a nonprofit organization that's 50 years old based in Paris that advocates for the rights of Americans living outside the US and has done a lot of important advocacy work on banking, taxes, voting, citizenship, transmission, etc. So the very first thing I want to say is that if you are not registered to vote in the 2024 election and you are a US citizen, then we are going to be hosting some virtual voting Q&As to help you with registering. But I want to give you the link to the Federal Voting Assistance Program in the chat, which is where you're going to fill out a postcard to mail into your election official. And this is going to be sent to voter registration for your last physical address in the US. So if you're not yet registered to vote, you can go ahead and do that on fdat.gov. And again, we're going to be hosting some voter registration, Q&A, and assistance over the next couple of months to make sure that everybody can request their ballot. I also want to make a little bit of an exciting announcement that if you're familiar with our work and our programs, one of our signature programs is called Fast Track to France, and it is about all of the preparation that you need to do in order to plan and execute a successful move to France. And we first released it in 2021, and it covers everything from identifying the types of work that you're going to be doing and your visa process through how to get your children registered for school, how to bring your pets, how to ship your belongings, etc. Our clients have access to it. We also sell it individually. And we just finished doing a really nice upgrade. We redid some of the videos that had become a little bit dated. We added some more information and documentation to some of our modules. We recorded a webinar with a specialist, Mary Catherine Lombard, who is a therapist and specialist in culture shock, working with a lot of the study abroad programs in France. So I'm really pleased with how this program came out. We just finished working on it today. So if you are in the early stages of your move and want some help with planning and organization, I would highly recommend checking out our program. And I'm going to stick that in the chat for you as well. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the questions that were pre-submitted. You can submit questions in the Q&A box if you did not have the opportunity to submit your questions in advance. The last thing I want to let you know before we get started is our final Q&A of the 2023-2024 season is going to be on Monday, July 1st. And then I'm going to be taking a break from the Q&A for the month of August, and we'll be back in September. I can't believe we're almost at the end of the school year. I have not yet seen the sun. It's been the rainiest year since, I think, 1886 is what I saw on Instagram earlier on one of the France social media web pages. Okay, Chris, visitor visa. If I have a visa de long séjour visiteur as a Canadian, am I allowed to arrive in France 1 to 2 weeks prior to the official start date of the visa? Does entering before the visa start date count towards the 90 out of 180 day rule and automatically roll over into the visa, or must I exit France and re-enter on the official start date of the visa? Thank you. Okay, so when you fill out the visa form, you can designate the date that you want your visa to actually start. So if you want to arrive in France on July 15th, you can put a start date of July 15th on your visa form that you submit to VFS Global or TLS Contact if you're in the UK. And that way you'll get a visa start date that corresponds to the date that your accommodations start in France, the date that your insurance policy starts in France, etc. Now, if it just so happens that you apply for the visa, June 10th, thinking you're going to leave September 10th, and then you get your visa back and your plans change and you can leave earlier, as a Canadian, it's not going to be an issue to arrive before the visa start date because you're allowed to travel into France without a visa. So you're just coming in on your passport, and technically it would be the 90 out of 180 day rule that would apply to those first, 10 days or whatever before the visa starts. When you go to validate your visa, you cannot put an arrival date that is anterior to your actual visa start date. So if you arrive in France on September 1st, but your visa starts on September 10th, you're going to have to put that you arrived on September 10th. Nobody is going to make you actually leave and come back. That advice would be different if you were from a country where people were not allowed to travel to France as tourists without some kind of tourist visa. So if you were from, for example, Morocco or Sri Lanka, where you can't just come to France as a tourist without requesting a short stay tourist visa, then that advice would be totally different, but that's not the case. Amy, we are beginning the information gathering portion of our intended move to France. We would like to begin looking for rentals, preferably houses in small towns or villages in Burgundy and the Alsace region, each for 4 to 5 weeks. We will retire next spring and would like to spend mid-October through mid-January in France. What's the best way or resource to begin this unique kind of search? So it's going to be really tough, I think, to find 4 to 5 week rentals in small towns and villages. You would have to look at places that have gîtes in slightly more touristy areas. It can be really tricky to secure a rental property in some of these smaller towns where, especially if you're looking for a house, because there's just not a lot of properties available. And because they're really reticent to rent to foreigners who don't have standard French dossier and CDI and tax declarations and a French guarantor and all of that, it's going to be really tricky. So I would look at the websites where you can reserve gîtes. That's going to be VRBO. There might be some on Airbnb. Booking.com is a really good one. And you can look at the Gîtes de France or Atout France websites to see if there are some in the areas that you want to look at. Julie, I am a dual US French citizen, French by marriage since divorced. I'm now engaged to an American. We currently live in the US. What are the visa nationality options for my fiance once we are married for us to live in France or another EU country? We will get married in the US in 2025. So your spouse will be able to apply for a vie privée et familiale visa based on being married to a French citizen. For another EU country, you're going to have to look at their requirements for showing up and requesting a carte de séjour as the spouse of an EU citizen. And I can't answer those questions because I only know about France. Megan, if we're moving to France this September to permanently live, will we pay our 2024 taxes in the US or France since we'll have lived in France less than 183 days this year? So you're going to make a tax declaration that starts on the date that you arrive in France. For example, if you arrive on September 1st, then you have September, October, November, December, 4 out of 12 months in France. Now, if you have earned income like salary, self-employment, business income, that is going to be taxable in France from September 1st. So whatever you earn between September 1st and December 31st, you're going to subject to social taxes and income taxes in France per the tax treaty. If you have, for example, US Social Security, if you have pensions, even if you have dividends that are sort of distributed evenly throughout the year, you are going to prorate the amount that you're reporting on your 2024 taxes. We have 2 videos that go through this in Fast Track to France. One was last year's tax workshop, and I also did a tax workshop on April 30th for the 2023 taxes that kind of goes over and explains how to do these calculations. But let's say you get $2,000 a month in US Social Security. Obviously, you're going to convert that into euros, but whatever the amount is for September to December, $8,000 converted into euros would be the amount of Social Security pension you would report on your French tax return for 2024. Now, you're not going to pay French tax on that, but it's important to report it and, of course, to report your foreign bank accounts as well. Now, if you are not earning money in France, like if you're not self-employed, if you don't have a job, etc., there's always a chance that the tax office might actually refuse to take your tax declaration if you are not in France for 183 days. However, I would highly encourage you to write a letter explaining, when you arrived, that you're arriving to stay long-term, etc., because technically you are required to, you become a French tax resident when you arrive with a long stay visa, and therefore you should encourage them to take your tax declaration. I'm moving to France as the spouse of an EU citizen. Do I have to wait until I get my carte séjour before being able to work and apply for Carte Vitale? Unfortunately, yes. So you have to apply for the carte séjour within 90 days of arriving in France. The sooner you're able to do it, the better. It can take a long time to process. We have a client who submitted hers in Paris in the fall, I think November actually. She got called in to do her fingerprints in the prefecture in January, and we still do not have her card. And because you don't have an AGDREF number, you don't, so AGDREF is the Application de Gestion Ressortissants Étrangers en France. So it's the sort of the prefecture's tracking application that they use for all foreigners in France. And you get assigned a 10-digit number that's your foreigner number that will follow you, from your visa to your carte de séjour, from validating your visa to your carte de séjour until you get French nationality or until you leave and apply for a new visa in the US. And when you are the spouse of an EU citizen, you get a number, but it's not valid until they actually approve your carte de séjour. And so she can't even make an appointment to potentially go pick up her card 3 months in the future, 2 months in the future, because she doesn't yet have that number. So be prepared to not be able to work for a few months. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that because there's no visa that you can apply for in advance to mitigate that situation. Scott, how difficult is it to get the auto-entrepreneur visa, and are there income requirements? So I would say it's mostly about knowing what to do for the auto-entrepreneur visa and not necessarily about it being difficult. Obviously, there are more documents to supply than some of the other visa types that you might apply for, but to me, none of the visa types are harder than any other. It's just, what is the visa type that is appropriate for your situation? Are you going to be self-employed? When you have an auto-entrepreneur or profession libérale entrepreneur visa, they're looking for you to make French minimum wage, which is currently 1,767 euros per month. So that's what's in all of our materials. It can occasionally increase slightly due to inflation. I think the last time it went up from like 1745 to 1767 or something. So, you do want to make sure that when you're preparing your financial projections and things like that, that you're projecting over that amount. They are looking at the income that comes from your self-employment activity. So they care about your other income in the sense that if you're not destitute, they're willing to be a bit more lenient on, if you don't get up to that minimum wage amount quickly. But technically, they're looking at what income is coming in from your self-employment activity that you say you're doing. And if your business isn't making money, they're not going to renew your visa for it. The other thing I want to point out is that they have become very strict on making sure that there's some kind of economic tie to France for the self-employment visas. And so, it's not just a matter of having all these clients in the US that you're working for. That's fine once you're in France. Once you're in France and declaring your income, they don't really care where the money's coming from. But in order to get the visa, they are looking at, do you have potential clients, potential collaborators, potential business projects happening in France with French companies or individuals? Susie, what is GarantMe? Can people from the US use it to find an apartment in France? Yes. So we work with GarantMe. GarantMe is a lease guarantee service, and it's especially for people who don't have a traditional French dossier for a rental agreement, and they don't have a guarantor in France. So in France, a guarantor would be somebody who has a good job, who can co-sign for your apartment, who has a CDI, who's lived in France for a long time, and they're willing to, provide, or basically they're saying that they're willing to pay your rent if you don't. So unless you have really good friends or family members, most people, even if they know you, are not willing to do that because they might be screwed. So, and landlord, rent non-payment service, insurance basically, is not going to like any foreign documents, right? That insurance, if a landlord is signing up for an insurance policy for if their tenant doesn't pay the rent, they are going to want to see, a certain number of years of French tax declarations, a certain amount of stable income, etc. And the more competitive the area, if you're looking in Nice, they can be wicked picky because they can take anybody they want. There's so much demand and not enough supply that it doesn't matter, how much money you might have sitting in the bank. So GarantMe is an insurance policy that you take out as the tenant that provides a guarantee to the landlord. And you pay about 4.5% of 1 year's rent to get this insurance policy. We can refer you to GarantMe. We work with them. And so if you do want a referral to that, then I would say fill out our referral request form, and we can put you in touch with somebody who can help with your application. We also work with some people who are real estate hunters, apartment search agents who help our clients find rental properties. So if you want to be put in touch with, with one of our partners who does rental searches in a particular city, I would highly recommend having somebody who can support your application, who can, advocate for you with an agency, because it's just so tricky in so many places. So I put our referral form in the chat. So if you want us to send you to GarantMe or to some of the apartment search services that we work with, we have some people who have found some really nice places like downtown Montpellier. We had some people in Nice find some really nice apartments. All right, Jacqueline, a retirement, so presumably a visitor visa. Would dividend and or annuity payments be taxed in the US or France? So according to the tax treaty, dividends from US companies and annuity payments, presumably pensions, and you asked about Social Security as well, all of those would continue to be taxed in the US. You have to report them on your French taxes, and you have to report all of your non-French financial accounts on your US taxes, but you will pay taxes on those in the US. Now, you have to be careful, because if you have dividends that are not in the cover of a retirement account, so let's say you have a regular brokerage account and you are invested in European or Asian stock markets or bonds, or, the top 100 countries in Africa growth index. I don't know what index funds are called, but anything that is not US, according to the tax treaty, would potentially be taxed in France. So if you have investments that are, not US companies, then it's possible that those would be subjected to French tax. But for everything else that you mentioned, dividends, annuities, Social Security benefits, taxed in the US under the tax treaty. The dividends, potentially, if they were not in a retirement account and they met a certain threshold, they could potentially be subject to PUMA, but usually you're looking at 20,000 euros in passive income or more before we talk about healthcare premiums, taking that income into account. Zora, long-term visitor visa. If one does not have a French driver's license, can a Vespa be ridden in the streets without one? I actually don't know if a Vespa qualifies for A1. So for motorcycle licenses, there are two levels. I think a Vespa would be the lower level, which is A1, which is motorcycles under a certain size. And I believe that's what size a Vespa is. If you have a license, so during your first year in France, before your US license is no longer valid for driving in France, you can drive a Vespa on your US license, even if it's not a motorcycle license. If you get a French license, then it's going to cover A1. So I have never driven any kind of motorcycle or bike, motorized bike in my life, but I have the A1 on my French license. If you have a motorcycle license in the US that is like the level above Vespa, it does not convert. Only the A1 would convert, and then you would have to take a motorcycle license exam. Pat, on the long stay visitor visa application form, it asks if you have ever had a visa before in France. If yes, it asks for an address of where you lived. I had a student visa in France, August 1995 to February 1996, but I have no record anymore of the address where I lived before the invention of email, no digital record. Close to Vaugirard metro stop. What should I put on the visa application if I don't remember the address from 30 years ago where I lived? So I would recommend possibly, if you happen to know where the study abroad program was or what university you were at, I would put that. If you want to randomly pick an address next to Vaugirard metro stop and put that address, you could also do that and just explain in the cover letter, like, hey, I lived in this neighborhood and had a visa 30 years ago, but I don't remember the exact street address. And honestly, from 30 years ago, nobody cares. If applying for a long stay visitor visa, what should be included in the cover letter for my application? And it's okay if the cover letter is in English. Yes, it's okay. Any documents can be submitted in English. I also have to have an affidavit swearing I won't work. Is there a pre-existing form for the affidavit, or is just a letter that I have to write? Usually I just have people include that in the cover letter. So I like to use the visitor visa cover letter for a couple of things. Now, it's not a required document, but I found it really helpful. One, to clarify that if you want to stay long term and you want to renew your visa, I would be very specific with, I am planning on retiring to France. I would like to live for at least several years in insert particular area. I would write maybe about the activities that you want to do if you're looking forward to joining any kind of local association, if you already have friends in France or people that you would like to volunteer with or work with or anything like that. I have visited Biarritz many times and taken classes at the local surfing school. I have hung out with the old guys playing pétanque along the Promenade des Anglais in Nice, and I look forward to improving my pétanque skills. I don't know. Whatever it is, just include some things about what you want to do, that you're planning on getting a renewable visa to be able to stay more than a couple of years. If you've bought property, indicate that, but if you haven't, it's fine. And just say, I understand that a condition of my visa is that I not work or seek employment in France, and I agree to abide by those terms. And I have my Social Security, retirement account, dividends, Willy Wonka inheritance money to support me. Can be short and sweet, sentence or two about why you like France, why you want to live here, sentence or two about what you want to do. Doesn't have to be that complicated. Kendra, student to profession libérale. I'm making a career transition and moving to France in June 2025. I'm planning to study French for a year in an intensive program on a student visa, then enroll in a one-year photography program that grants an RNCP 6 diploma, L3 for licence pro. In terms of transitioning from a student visa, my understanding from the school is that this will allow me to apply for a profession libérale visa and work as a freelancer. Do you see any pitfalls with the plan? Should I consider the passeport talent after finishing training if I have a modest portfolio by then? I spoke with Campus France. They could not tell me. Yeah, you won't be eligible for recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise because you won't have completed a degree program of at least 2 years. So yeah, in short, yes, profession libérale is going to be the visa type that will be appropriate for you. Profession artistique isn't really going to work for photography in this situation. It would be more like if you were selling numbered prints, if you were displaying your photography in art shows and selling it in galleries, then it would be more artistique. But if you're doing photography as a service, then it falls more into the profession libérale category. So, yeah, I think you don't have to have a degree in photography in order to work as a photographer in France. If you already are a photographer and you have already you are experienced enough to be doing shoots and charging people, you could just go right for the photography profession libérale visa and skip the student visa, even if you still plan to enroll in the program. Like, you can be a student on the profession libérale visa. You cannot be self-employed on the student visa, but you can absolutely switch. And that's going to depend. So we're revamping our Complete French Business Incubator program as well. Just finished recording some new videos for that. One of the things we talk about is the change of status, how when you're changing status from something to, say profession libérale, you're going to have to figure out what your prefecture does, how to make that appointment. In some prefectures, it's going to be submit a form online. It's not through NF. In other cases, like Bordeaux, you send things in the mail and you hope that it gets to the right person. And then in some cases, you're going to make an appointment and go into the prefecture. So it really depends, like, what department you're in, and you're going to have to figure out where to file that change of status. You also want to be really aware that it can take a long time when you change your status. When you apply for a visa in the US or in your home country, typically you have it back in about 2 weeks. But when you apply for a change of status, it really depends on the processing time of your prefecture. Airbnb now has long-term rentals for 6 to 12 months. Do you see a problem with securing before arriving rather than arriving with a short-term rental and an apartment search once there? I'm planning to buy after the first year. So my main concern is that you want to have a place where you can get mail, especially if you're going to be a freelancer, because certain things are still sent to you in mail. Now they're trying to reduce the amount of things that actually go to you in the post, but there are still a few things that get sent to you. And if you cannot get mail at your Airbnb, that's going to be a problem. First of all, I'm not sure that the 6 to 12 month Airbnb thing is totally legal, because that would be a legal time frame for something called a bi-mobilité, which it has to be, very specific circumstances. I wouldn't trust that. Usually what we would advise is you want 4 to 6 weeks, a little longer if you're in one of the big cities that is really a tight rental market. Like if you're in Nice, you probably want at least 8 weeks. But you really want to put pressure on yourself to find a long-term lease that is a primary residence lease where you're going to be able to get mail, where you're going to be able to renew. It doesn't matter whether you're buying at some point. Buying in France, now again, we cover this in Fast Track to France. There's a whole module on buying property. It can take 3 months or longer for a sale to go through. Even if you're living in an unfurnished rental in the middle of nowhere, the maximum amount of notice you would have to give at any time during your lease would be 3 months. There are no penalties for breaking a lease early or in the middle. There are only penalties for a landlord who tries to break a lease early or in the middle. So I would say you want to get into a long-term primary residence lease as quickly as possible. And then when you have a property and you know what the completion date is going to be, that's when you can calculate and give your notice. Teresa, long stay visitor visa. We are moving with a 12-year-old with intentions for him to finish high school and on to university if he chooses. We have cousins in France, but it seems the only visa we can apply for is the long stay visitor visa. Our previous professions are firefighters. There a different visa we can or should apply for other than the visitor visa, please? I mean, as firefighters, not really. That's not, it's a regulated profession. It's something that is often volunteer in France. There's no visa that is just like randomly allowing you to work. It has to be either a job that is sponsoring you for a particular contract, or you have to be starting your own self-employment thing. I would encourage you to purchase and read foolproof French visas to understand all of the options that are available to you. And then you can schedule a consultation with me if you need to talk through your questions and things, but I don't know off the top of my head what could be a good fit if you're not self-employed and you're not retired. I will say that it's way easier for a child to integrate and to obtain French nationality if they arrive before 13. So I know you're getting you're getting close to the wire and you're asking me what visa type, but you may want to consider, I don't usually advise getting over here and then figuring it out. But if you come as a visitor and then want to change in a year and a half, it could be to your advantage to get your child into France before the age of 13, because then it becomes really easy for him to get the ability to stay long term when he reaches adulthood. Catherine, liberal or independent visa? How far ahead of the proposed visa start date can you make a visa appointment? You can go to your visa appointment up to 90 days before your planned arrival date in France. How long do you need to have proof of accommodation booked for when applying for the visa? Again, I suggest 4 to 6 weeks, unless it's like a really, really tight rental market like Nice. It depends a little bit on your financial resources. If you have, really significant financial resources where it's obviously not going to be a problem if you have to reserve something at the last minute, then 4 to 6 weeks is totally fine. If you are on a really tight budget, then I would say you want to secure a place within your budget first. Yaritza, I work as a freelancer in the USA, but I'm able to work anywhere. I'm looking into taking French classes and was looking at the student visa, but I came across the long stay visa. I assume you mean the visitor visa. I want to see which is the better option. I'm looking to go to France for about 4 to 6 months, and I don't speak French. So first thing I want to say is that there is no such thing as a digital nomad visa for France. If you are living and working in France, then you need to be registered to do so. You are not allowed to be self-employed on a student visa. So if you're getting a short-term visa for under 6 months, it's a temporary visa that's not renewable, and you're not establishing residency at all, then is anybody going to catch you? Probably not. But if there's any chance that you might want to renew your visa or stay longer, then student visa and visitor visa are not good ideas. RJ, visitor visa. We are a US couple planning to retire in France. Other than mistakes on the application or an incomplete application, what are the most common reasons for denial of a long stay visitor visa under those circumstances? Honestly, usually it's people like saying they're going to work when they shouldn't be, or being really unclear about the reasons they want to go to France. I do not see a lot of Americans get denied for visitor visas. In relation to the selected validity start date of the visitor visa, how long after that date must we arrive in France so as not to run afoul of the law or jeopardize the visa? You need to validate the visa to a long-term address within 90 days. You can put on the start date of the visa, you can set the start date of the visa to be any date you want, and you have to have accommodation, your temporary healthcare plan, and your departure date all lined up. Now, they're not going to request a copy of your plane ticket, but if you're saying you want a visa to start September 1st, then you need to have accommodation from September 1st in France, and you need to have a temporary insurance policy that starts September 1st in France. Now, of course, if you like already own property and the property is going to be there whether you arrive September 1st or October 15th, then basically what you would have to do would be adjust to the dates of your insurance policy when you are going to arrive. But yeah, you want those things to line up to the start date of your visa, and then you want to arrive in France. And if you don't own property and you don't already have, a long-term address where you can get mail for, a 12-month lease, then you need to find that as quickly as possible so you can validate your visa within the 90 days. Obviously, arriving after your visa start date reduces the amount of time that you have to find long-term housing before you can validate your visa. I prefer very, very strongly not to validate the visa with a temporary address because it tends to cause a mess. You then have to go and change your address on your online account when you move, and things like, sending in your healthcare application. You need to do that on day 90 or day 91 if you want to have any hope of having proof of coverage by the time you go to renew your visa at the end of your first year. So if you don't have a long-term address yet and you don't have a place to live, you can't send in your healthcare application yet, and that's going to cause problems later. Estelle, is it possible to visit the visa migration office in Paris without an appointment just to ask questions? I don't know what office you mean. If such an office exists, I would love to know about it. How to register a sole proprietor, sole trader business in France. So there's multiple different types of sole trader businesses. There's micro-entrepreneur, which would require a profession libérale entrepreneur visa, and setting up as self-employed on the INPI website, which is something that we do for our clients in our VIP concierge package for entrepreneurs and artists. And it's something that we have video modules on how to do in our complete French business incubator. So that would require, putting together a business plan with potential clients and getting that type of self-employment visa. Now, there are also two types of companies that are considered sole proprietorships. And one would be the SASU, the Société à Action Simplifiée Unipersonnelle, meaning a one-person SAS. And the other type is an EURL, an Entreprise Unipersonnelle à Responsabilité Limitée. And those are two different company types where your status as the owner and operator of the company is slightly different. So an SASU, which is the type of business that I have, I am the salaried president of the company. So I pay myself a salary, I pay social charges on the salary amount, and then there's a profit from the company that can also get distributed to me or get kept in the company. When you are an EURL, your status is of a director and you are not a salaried employee. You are considered to be self-employed as the director. You receive owner's compensation, which is subject to a certain percent of social charges, which is different. And the company is not giving you or paying you a salary and profit. It is paying you self-employment earnings, which are not really different. So the overall percentage of charges is lower, but basically all of the net income is subject to them. We have videos on these different business types in Complete French Business Incubator that our clients have as well. For each of these 3 business types, it's going to potentially be a different type of visa. So an SASU or an EURL would be either a classic entrepreneur visa or a passport talent entrepreneur visa. And let me just explain the distinction between those visa types. So a passport talent is if you have at least a master's degree or 5 years of professional experience in your field, and you're starting a company with at least a 30,000 euro investment in the social capital of that company. That means you're putting 30,000 euros into your future company, and then that becomes the company's money that it can then spend on, its business expenses. What I mean by a classic entrepreneur visa, just to make the distinction with the passport talent entrepreneur, is you don't have to have a master's, you don't have to have 5 years of professional experience, and you don't have to invest 30,000 euros. You can invest as little as €1 in creating the social capital of your company. However, you do have to, in both cases, get approval that your company is a real and serious business project that is going to be viable in France and successful. Passport talent entrepreneur is for 4 years. Classic entrepreneur is just for 1 year. So you do have to show that your company is viable and paying you money a lot more quickly when you are just on the classic entrepreneur or when you are self-employed and on the micro entrepreneur, profession libérale, auto-entrepreneur, is the type. There's a lot of nuances there. They're all covered in the Complete French Business Incubator. They're also covered in Foolproof French Visas. There's a chapter on each visa type. So if you haven't read it, I would recommend. Obviously, setting up a company involves a lot more steps. You have to undertake all of the process of setting up the company before you actually, request the visa. So when we do this for our clients, we write the business plan. We work with a law firm that can draft the legal documents because we're not lawyers. We help with all of the other company creation, admin, things like setting up the company address, hooking you up with an accountant, et cetera, and all of the things that are going to be required for getting the business approved and then getting the business visa approved. Okay, Susan, entrepreneur or. I think I read somewhere that the new immigration law permits individuals who are hired by a company to seek their own visa rather than waiting for the company to sponsor them. Is this true? Not in that way. That sounds like something that has gone through telephone a couple of times. So it's true that people who work in certain, they're called métiers en tension, can now request a visa on the basis of employment without having to get prior work authorization from their employer, or their employer getting prior work authorization from the government. The challenge with that is that the law also created a délit, so basically a misdemeanor, of working without the proper paperwork. So it has created a catch-22 of technically you can go and request a visa with, some pay slips and things from your company that didn't request work authorization for you if you haven't previously had a work visa for France, but you are also sort of admitting that you were working without a visa and not following the law. So it's a little bit up in the air as to how exactly that is going to play out in the real world. But the short answer is no, there is no such thing as a salaried work visa you can apply for without already having a job to sponsor you. Okay, I have now finished all the questions that were pre-submitted, so I'm going to go to the questions that are in the chat or the Q&A box. Can you explain what a note verbale is? It's required for the long stay visitor visa. No, it's not. A note verbale is if you are applying with a diplomatic passport. So I assume that is not your case. You are very likely applying with a very ordinary passport and will not need that. A long stay visitor visa is better for more than 6 months, or what do you mean? I'm not sure what I mean. A long stay visitor visa is appropriate for the amount of time that you intend to live in France. If you intend to live in France and renew your visa, you want a 12-month visa and you want to state in your cover letter that you intend on renewing and, staying in France for several years to enjoy your retirement. You don't have to project yourself like until death do you part, but, project yourself into a future for a couple years in France. If you are doing something that you shouldn't really be doing, like working remotely in France for a longer term, but not setting up to do that in a legal way, then you would do best to have a shorter length visa that does not in any way remotely at all establish you as a tax resident, and then leave. Can we access this recording at a later time? Yes, it will be edited tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, if not then by Thursday, and posted on our YouTube channel where we post all of our past Q&As. I hope to move to France in 2025 or 2026 on an auto-entrepreneur visa or passport talent visa. My daughter is currently a senior in high school and will likely follow me after college graduation. Until what age can she come to France under my visa? 18, at best 21. So unfortunately, I think that's not going to work. She will have to have her own visa. If she were here before 18, she could probably piggyback onto your visa until 21, but because she will be an adult already, she's going to need her own visa. I don't know what you mean by talk to the visa office, but there's no visa office to talk to. I'm the visa office. There is nobody whose job it is to answer your questions about French visas or to advise you. That's why my job exists. The consulate has outsourced everything to VFS, who does not know the slightest thing about French visas. If you're not applying for a visitor visas, they tend to do okay with because it's what they see a lot. Student visas, they tend to do okay with because they see those quite a bit as well. But I mean, we send people with talent passport applications with, all these documents for opening a French company, and they're like, we don't understand what this is. This can't be real. So yeah, there's nobody whose job it is to help you with visas except mine. In other countries, you can go to migration office without an appointment. That sounds nice. That is not France. You can't even go to the prefecture without an appointment anymore. Like, you used to be able to go and get information from the prefecture, ask a question, get a ticket, get updates on your status. Not anymore. COVID killed all of that. They don't answer the phone. They don't answer their emails. I believe right now, my suspicion, because there's been a significant decline in the number of people going into these government job positions. They do get good vacation time, but the pay is not good compared to what they could be earning in the private sector. Most of the people that are working in these jobs now are very young. I suspect they are contractors or like on temporary contracts and have not passed any kind of concours. I've been recently to the prefecture with clients and seen like nobody over 25, or like a couple people who are clearly like the old school fonctionnaire who have been there for a really long time, who are settled in their careers. But there's a really big gap between the people who are in that position and the new people who are very young, who cannot answer your questions. It's bad. It's bad. And when you submit things online, the people on the website, they're only there for technical issues. They're not, and even then half the time they can't answer the questions, and everything is forwarded on to the prefectures where, you have no contact with the people who are potentially reviewing your file. How long does it take for approval of a classic entrepreneur visa, the one without significant investment? I would say that you want to submit your business plan for approval at least 2 to 3 months before you want to actually apply for your visa. So in that case, you have to write the business plan. You have to do all the things to set up the company. You have to, draft the legal documents. You do have to make some kind of investment, even if it's only €1. I wouldn't recommend starting a company with €1. So you have to prepare all of the visa application documents. Then you have to get approval from DREETS. I would expect that to take 2 months. Honestly, most of the visa applications we do are either Profession Libérale or they're the €30,000 Passeport Talent investment visas, because to me, the classic entrepreneur in the middle doesn't make a whole lot of sense. All right. Do I need to apply for a long stay visa first if I'm moving to France as a spouse of an EU citizen? No, you cannot apply for a long stay visa first. You have to request a carte de séjour within 90 days of arriving in France. And so for you, it's even more important to establish an address very quickly after you arrive, because you can't put in your carte de séjour request until you have proof of address. If we are long-term residents of France, how is our estate taxed when we die? Specifically, would our assets in the USA be subject to French estate taxes? It depends a little bit on what kind of assets and how long you've been living in France when you die. We are going to have on June 25th, I believe it's June 25th, a webinar with a notaire who is going to be able to answer that question, because I am not the least bit qualified to talk about that. But it brings up a really interesting point that we go over slightly in Fast Track to France, and that it's really important to consider is when you live in France, French law is what applies to you. And if you've been living here for a long time, that could potentially include financial planning and estate planning issues. So there are a whole list of questions, which again, we've put together a workbook of the things that you should ask in Fast Track to France, but we are not the people that you can ask those questions to, because we're not the legal people. My experience is I've worked in a tax office. I know probably more than the average American in France. I know slightly more about taxes because of certain professional experiences that I've had, but it's not my area. So what we have done for our clients is put together, this is a list of questions you should answer for yourself. And then you should go see a notaire, or an estate planner, international financial planner, to talk through what could potentially happen to your assets. So that's going to be on June 25th. I have not received the bio for the notaire guy. He's currently doing some work for me on, so that I can be ready to die someday. My dad had a cousin who unfortunately passed away last year after an illness, and he was about 70, I think. Did not have a will, and it was not a fun situation for anybody in the family who had to sort through all that, and it would be even worse in France. So a really important topic to bring up. And yeah, we'll send out the details for that Q&A really soon, but I think that's going to be a really popular one. I asked a question on the Google forum, but can't stay. Yeah, the recording will be on YouTube. Is it better to sell a U.S. property before or after moving to France in terms of taxes? Will a U.S. property trigger sale on any particular taxes in France? So not during the first year. Now, this is a question that came up in a Q&A that we did recently with our accountant, Isaac Bashisha of Monceau CPA. He's also going to be joining us on the estate planning workshop with the notaire at the end of the month. But somebody asked that question very specifically. And so if the property sells within the first year, then France isn't going to care really about taxing it. If it's after the first year and it would not be considered your primary residence anymore because you will have been living in France, then it's possible that it would be subject to tax. So you would definitely want to talk to an accountant about that situation. Can I apply for a long stay visitor visa at one consulate and do the interview at a different one that I applied to? No. So when you fill out the visa form, you code it to the visa center that you're going to be going to. So in the US and Canada, that's VFS Global. In the UK, that's TLS Contact. Once you select the city that you will be submitting your application to, it generates a barcode, and the application, when it's finalized, will only go to that city's VFS. So if you fill out a form that says Boston on it, and then you make an appointment in New York, guess what? You have to redo your visa form. You submit the visa form online, you print it out, you bring it with you with all of your supporting documents to the appropriate VFS office. You have to make the appointment separately. Now, all of this we take care of for our VIP concierge clients, or we review it for people who are in Fast Track, who are in our self-guided program, get a visa application review with me before they go to their appointment. But there's no interview per se. It is going to an appointment and giving them a stack of papers. And then they pass it along to the consulate, who reviews it and issues your visa and sends back your passport. Is it ridiculous to think I can apply for a long stay visitor visa June 12th and be approved by September 1st? I think if you go on June 12th, that you will have your visa back by the end of June. So not ridiculous at all. If you don't already have your appointment, though, it might be hard to get an appointment before June 12th. All right. I have time for one or two more questions. Can I apply for the visa in the USA but use my New Zealand passport? I have a primary home currently in New Zealand, and I'm a New Zealand citizen. So you can apply for a visa in any country where you have citizenship or residence. So if you are applying on your New Zealand passport in the US, you can certainly do that and give them your New Zealand passport. There's a section on the visa form where you have to put, I'm applying from a different country than my citizenship, and you have to fill out some kind of ID, for why. So you can put like your US passport number and, your US passport expiration date, etc. And then there's, nationality at birth, etc., that you will have to fill out. And then I would just mention in your cover letter, like, hey, I'm a New Zealand and US citizen, and I'm giving you my New Zealand passport. But it really doesn't make a difference. I'm self-employed and the long stay visa says that for the purpose of travel, I have to put a letter from my employer, proof of business ownership. I'm a contract worker, but do not have an LLC. How will this work? You are not allowed to work in France on a visitor visa. So you need to apply for a self-employment visa if you're planning on working as self-employed in France. So that would be a profession libérale entrepreneur, and you need to look at the requirements for that. I do not recommend putting any information about working when you're applying for a visitor visa. If anybody advises you to do that, I would ask them if they're willing to pay your tax bill if and when you get caught. All right, so I just want to remind everybody the next Q&A is going to be Monday, July 1st, and then following that, we're going to take a break in August and do a new one in September. If you would like referrals to any of the partners that we discussed, I'm going to give you that link again. If you are in the beginning stages of planning your move to France, a couple of resources for you. One is obviously our book, Foolproof French Visas, which goes through every single one of the basically 29 different ways that you can move to France, the requirements of each, why you might choose one particular option over the other. That can be really helpful if if you have different self-employment options, different salaried visa options, etc. If you want to schedule a call with me, I do offer 1-hour paid consultations where we can talk through any and all of your questions about moving to France, getting the right visa, et cetera, et cetera. You can apply the cost of the consultation to one of our packages if you sign up, or one of our courses if you sign up within 90 days. I'm going to give you that link as well to schedule a 1-hour consultation with me. And then, as I mentioned, if you are in the planning stages of your move, we have our program Fast Track to France, which is 10 modules covering all sorts of different admin things that you're going to have to do to get ready and to prepare for your move. So it does cover all of the questions you're going to want to talk to an attorney, estate planner, an international financial planner, etc., about during the move and relocation process. It has our workbook with questions to ask them. It has a career workbook if you are planning on developing your career or working in France. We cover things like bringing your children and enrolling them in school, bringing your pets, bringing your belongings. We recently did, as I mentioned, our culture shock workshop, which talks about, adapting to living in France and how to navigate the ups and downs of, living here when you're not on vacation and things get real and things get hard. So it can be a really great resource. And then, of course, if you are one of our VIP concierge clients where we're doing all of the admin stuff for you and getting you set up in France with all of your French admin, you do get access to those programs as part of our services. So if that's all for this evening, then I will let you go. And thank you very much for coming. I will see you in the Americans in France group on Facebook. We will be sending out announcements about that estate planning workshop at the end of the month. We'll be sending those out very shortly because I know that's going to be a really popular event. And I will see you soon on the internet. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your evening or rest of your day if you are in the US.